From the moment I signed the marriage certificate, I knew I was signing up for loneliness wrapped in a wedding ring. Willow stood beside me, a vision of perfection in her white dress, her face a portrait of frozen detachment. She didn't smile once, not when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, not when our colleagues from the hospital clapped politely, not even when I held her hand and promised to love her with all I had. This was an arranged marriage, a favor between families, a lifeline for her father's failing career in exchange for tying her to me, a man she barely looked at. I was a top surgeon, respected, calm, and disciplined, but none of that mattered to Willow, because her heart belonged to someone else. Ethan. Ethan, the golden boy of the hospital, charming, brilliant, loud where I was quiet, warm where I was reserved. They grew up together, whispered secrets as kids, and laughed like soulmates. But he wasn't chosen. I was, and Willow never forgave me for it. From day one, she was cold. She rarely spoke unless she had to, and when she did, her words were knives dipped in honey. "You don't touch me," she said once, flatly, without even turning her head. "This isn't a real marriage. Don't pretend it is." I tried to respect her space, hoping time would change things. I brought her coffee every morning, left notes on her locker, booked us dinners that she never showed up for. At work, she was all professionalism. Not a single soul knew we were married. She told everyone she lived alone. The only person she spoke warmly to was Ethan. She lit up around him, her voice softer, her smile real, and I stood in the shadows watching the woman I married act like a stranger to me and a lover to someone else. Ethan never once looked at me with malice. He was too wrapped up in himself to even notice the tension. He caught colds easily, skipped surgeries when he had a fever, and once even left mid-shift because his dog was feeling anxious. Willow covered for him every time. She bent rules, shifted schedules, traded shifts, just to make sure Ethan was fine. And I let it happen. I took the night shifts, picked up the slack, stayed behind after long surgeries just to make her life easier, hoping one day she'd look at me the way she did at him. But hope is a cruel addiction. She kept our marriage hidden for 2 years, never brought me up in conversations, and if someone did mention me, she brushed it off with a fake smile and changed the topic. At home, she barely said a word. We lived in the same apartment, but in separate worlds, hers filled with messages from Ethan, calls from friends, and mine with silence and longing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was patient, stupidly hopeful. I thought if I just stayed the course, loved her enough, sacrificed enough, she'd come around. I told myself love wasn't about receiving, it was about giving without conditions. But I was breaking. Every smile she gave Ethan felt like a dagger. Every shrug of coldness she threw at me chipped away at whatever strength I had left. I started writing a journal, pouring my heart into pages no one would read, just to stay sane. She never asked me how I was, never once said goodnight unless we were in front of our families. I remember one night coming home early from a triple bypass surgery that nearly killed me with exhaustion, only to find her sitting on the couch with Ethan, laughing at something on his phone. She looked up and saw me, and the laughter died immediately. "Why are you home so early?" she asked, like I was intruding. Ethan smiled, awkward but oblivious. "Hey, George, you good?" I nodded and walked straight into the bedroom, my heart heavy and useless. Later that night, I heard her on the phone whispering to Ethan about how frustrating it was to live with someone she didn't choose. That was the first time I cried in the bathroom. I kept the water running so she wouldn't hear. The next morning, I still made her coffee. I had learned to live in the quiet spaces between heartbreaks, swallowing my pain like bitter medicine and pretending I was still healing. But the truth was, I wasn't healing. I was decaying, slowly, invisibly, under the weight of a love that never took root. Willow's indifference was no longer passive. It had become an active force, a daily avalanche of small cruelties. She left the apartment early every morning without a word, dressed immaculately for work as if she was leaving for war, her eyes never meeting mine. At the hospital, she moved like a queen through the halls, commanding attention, drawing admiration, and reserving her warmth for one man alone, Ethan. The way she smiled at him twisted something in me. I watched her linger at his side during rounds, touch his arm lightly when she laughed, offer to review his charts even when she had no obligation to. I tried to pretend it didn't matter. I tried to act like a professional, like a husband who understood her heart needed time. But she wasn't healing either. She was still living in the shadow of a love that was never hers, hoping one day Ethan would wake up and realize what he'd missed. And I was the placeholder. I knew it when she introduced herself to new interns using her maiden name, when she sat at different lunch tables to avoid the rare chance someone might ask about us, when she flinched the one time my hand brushed hers by accident in the elevator. I held on through all of it, kept my head down, stayed late for her shifts, traded difficult surgeries just to lighten her load. The nurses knew. They looked at me with pity when they thought I wasn't watching. One even asked me once, gently, "Why do you still try?" I didn't have an answer. Maybe I believed that love could bloom even in the coldest soil, or maybe I was just scared of giving up on something that cost me everything. But the final break didn't come with a scream. It came in whispers, little choices she made that slowly pushed me to the edge. I had developed a small condition in my heart that needed surgical correction. Nothing dangerous, just a routine procedure. Ironically, it was the one thing I couldn't fix myself. Willow was supposed to perform it. She was the best cardiac surgeon in the hospital, and despite everything, I trusted her skills. We didn't talk about it much. I scheduled the surgery quietly, asked her if she was okay handling it, and she gave me a cold nod like it was just another task on her list. But on the day of the surgery, as I lay prepped and ready, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. From the next room, Ethan was complaining about a sore throat and a mild fever. "I'm not feeling great," he muttered. "Might take the day off. Don't want to get anyone sick." Willow's voice followed, soft and filled with concern, the tone she never used with me. "Oh no, Ethan, you shouldn't be alone like this. Let me reschedule my case. I'll cover your post-op rounds, bring you meds, whatever you need." The nurse hesitated. "But Dr. George's surgery. He'll be fine," Willow said sharply. "Let Dr. Patel handle it. It's a simple procedure." My heart pounded, not from the condition, but from the betrayal. I wanted to sit up, to scream, to ask her how she could toss me aside like this. But I didn't. I lay there, paralyzed by the chill in her voice, realizing she would rather risk my life than leave Ethan to deal with a fever. Dr. Patel wasn't a bad surgeon, but he wasn't the one I chose. I trusted her. I loved her. And she abandoned me, not because she hated me, but because I simply didn't matter. The surgery began. The lights above me blurred as the anesthesia pulled me under, and my last thought was of her face, not the cold mask she wore at home, but the way she smiled when she looked at Ethan. I never saw the end of that operation. Something went wrong, something small but fatal, and I slipped away on that table like a forgotten patient no one fought to save. I didn't feel pain, just a heavy silence, and then nothingness. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't in a hospital. I was standing over my own body, watching nurses scramble, alarms blaring, and Dr. Patel shaking his head with a pale, defeated look. I was dead. Just like that. No farewell. No final words. No one had even thought to call her back. She arrived hours later, still smelling like Ethan's cologne, still carrying the guiltless expression of someone who believed she'd done the right thing. When she was told I hadn't made it, she didn't cry. She just stared at my body like it was a stranger's. The regret didn't come instantly. It started slow, like rot beneath the floorboards. And I, now a ghost tethered to the weight of betrayal, followed her. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I couldn't let go. I needed to see what she would do with the guilt. I needed to know if she would ever understand what she'd done. After death, time loses meaning, but pain doesn't. I hovered in the corners of rooms I once walked through, a silent specter tethered to the woman who had buried me in her negligence. Willow returned home that night without a tremble in her hands, placing her keys on the table, removing her coat, and washing her face like it was just another ordinary day. But I saw it, the small, nearly imperceptible crack in her routine. She paused before walking past the photo frame I had placed on the bookshelf, a picture of us from our wedding day she never once acknowledged while I was alive. Her eyes flicked toward it, just for a second, and then away. But the crack was there, and I clung to it, watching, waiting. At work, she told her colleagues the news with sterile composure. "George didn't make it through the procedure," she said in clipped syllables, like she was reporting a case study. No one asked why she hadn't performed the surgery herself. No one knew. No one but her. and me. Ethan showed up at the funeral, wearing black and fake grief. He hugged her too long, rubbed her back while she stayed stiff in his arms, and whispered something about how she was stronger than anyone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag my soul back into that coffin and punch through the wood just to haunt him properly. But I didn't. I stayed still, watched, waited. The first real shift in her came 3 nights after the funeral. She woke up in a cold sweat, breathing hard, clutching the edge of her bed like it was a cliff. George, she whispered into the dark like she was testing if the name still held any weight in her mouth. It did. She got out of bed and walked into the kitchen, stood by the coffee machine I used to use every morning. She didn't make any. She just stared at it, unmoving. The next day, she came to work and asked Dr. Patel without preamble what went wrong during the surgery. He hesitated, uncomfortable. It was minor. A vessel slipped. Bleeding wasn't caught in time. I should have. He trailed off, not meeting her eyes. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just nodded, turned around, and walked away. But that night, she pulled out my journal. I watched her hesitate before opening it, her fingers brushing the edges like it was a wound she wasn't ready to reopen. Page after page, she read my heartbreak in ink, every small moment I had tried to love her, every word she'd never heard me say out loud, every hope I had bottled up and buried beneath her silence. She wept. Finally. Violently. Her sobs echoed through the apartment like they had been waiting, bottled up for 2 years. She collapsed on the couch, hugging the journal to her chest like it was the last piece of me that mattered. And still, I didn't forgive her. I watched her crumble, watched her wake up each day more hollow than the last, and I felt nothing, because I had begged for her heart when I was alive, and she had given it to a man who wouldn't even show up on a bad day without calling in sick. The hospital became her prison. She stopped laughing at Ethan's jokes. She stopped eating lunch with him. She even asked for a transfer out of his department. He was confused. He tried to reach out, asked her what was wrong, why she was pulling away. She snapped at him once in front of a nurse, something sharp and broken. He died because I chose you. Ethan didn't understand it. He shrugged it off, like it was guilt speaking, not truth. But I knew she meant it. She began avoiding everyone. She started coming in early, staying late, working through weekends. She became the ghost I used to be, present, unseen, unnoticed. I followed her everywhere, not out of love anymore, but out of need. I needed to see her suffer, needed to witness the weight of my death crash into her soul like an avalanche. She visited my grave once, just once. She stood there in silence, her lips trembling, her eyes swollen. I didn't hate you, she whispered, voice cracking. I just didn't know how to love you. Not until it was too late. I didn't believe her. Not then. Because if love meant leaving someone to die so you could bring soup to someone else, then her definition of love was poison. She began having nightmares about the surgery, about me. In one, she dreamed I woke up on the table and screamed her name while no one listened. She woke up sobbing again, alone. And I stood there, invisible in the corner, arms crossed, heart colder than hers had ever been. She deserved this. I had given her everything. I had swallowed my pride, my dignity, my joy for her. And she gave me absence. Now she felt it too. She started attending therapy, something she never believed in. She told the therapist, an older woman named June, about how the marriage was arranged, how she had resented me for being the man chosen for her, how she loved someone else but married me anyway because she couldn't say no to her parents. June asked if she ever gave me a chance. Willow was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that made the room go cold even for me. I didn't just not give him a chance. I punished him for being the one who stayed. June didn't say anything. She just let Willow cry. I hovered behind her, watching her break open. And part of me wanted to comfort her, to tell her I still saw the girl I once hoped to love. But I stayed silent. I wasn't hers to talk to anymore. She started wearing her wedding ring again, quietly. She didn't mention it to anyone, but she wore it. On her finger, like a wound she wanted everyone to overlook. Ethan noticed. He asked once, jokingly, "What's with the sudden jewelry? Didn't think you were the sentimental type." Willow stared at him for a long time before replying, "I'm not. Not for the wrong people." And she walked away, I followed, curious. She went home, opened her phone, deleted every photo of Ethan, every message, every moment she had once thought meant something. And then she stared at our wedding photo again. This time, she didn't look away. I could have loved you, she whispered. If I hadn't been so blind, I could have loved you better than anyone else. I wanted to scream at her, tell her it was too late, but all I could do was watch as she finally reached for a love that no longer existed because I was already gone. Grief didn't turn Willow soft, it stripped her down to bone. She no longer painted on that cold, elegant mask she wore so effortlessly during our marriage. Now she simply moved through life like someone carrying a corpse in her chest. Mine. Her smiles vanished. Her laughter died. The only trace of emotion she showed was guilt, and it dripped from her every word like blood from a wound that wouldn't close. I followed her not because I loved her. I didn't, not anymore, but because I wanted her to feel everything I had once begged her to see. And she did. Every morning began with silence, not the indifferent kind she used to offer me, but the kind that clawed at her walls from the inside. She stopped visiting Ethan. She stopped answering his texts. One day he confronted her in the hospital corridor, his face lined with confusion and frustration. "Why are you shutting me out?" he demanded, trying to understand a woman who no longer needed him. Willow didn't even flinch. "Because the only person who ever gave a damn about me is dead, and I let him die." She walked away before he could answer. Ethan stood frozen, not knowing the depth of the knife she had just stabbed into herself. That night, she curled up on the floor of our, no, her, apartment, hugging my favorite hoodie like it was a person, tears soaking through the fabric. She whispered things I never heard while alive. I was scared of how good you were, scared that if I let myself love you, I'd never stop, and I hated you for being there when he wasn't. The words didn't heal anything. They didn't even scratch the surface of what she'd done. But they haunted me, tangled themselves around my spirit like thorns. Every moment she mourned me, a small part of me wanted to reach for her hand. But I didn't, because love offered too late is just cruelty with a pretty mask. Her guilt turned obsessive. She started reading everything I ever wrote, emails I never sent, old journals I had forgotten, post-it notes I left in books she never opened. She searched for meaning, for signs that I had truly loved her. And she found them, page after page. But it was never about love anymore. It was about redemption, and I wasn't sure if she deserved it. She returned to therapy, but this time her confessions grew darker. She spoke of how she used to feel repulsed when I smiled at her, how she used to wish I would just stop trying so she wouldn't feel so guilty, how she once saw me crying on the balcony after a long day and pretended she didn't so she wouldn't have to comfort me. "I thought he was weak," she whispered to June, trembling, "but he was stronger than I ever was." I watched her shrink into herself, watched her drown in the weight of her own heart. I thought I'd feel satisfaction. I thought I'd feel peace. But all I felt was distance. Her world became smaller. Her apartment turned into a shrine. My books untouched, my mug still in the cupboard. Her ring always on. The hospital felt it too. She started pulling away from surgeries. Her hands shook during procedures. She was benched once for making a minor error, and the way she reacted scared everyone. She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. She just stared at the floor like a child being punished, then walked out without another word. She disappeared for 3 days. I followed her across cities, watching her sit alone on empty benches, watching the wind tear through her hair as she whispered apologies into nothing. One night, she returned to the hospital, not to work, but to sneak into the OR where I had died. It was empty, cold, the lights dimmed. She stood in the center, placed her hand on the table, and finally broke. "You trusted me," she whispered, falling to her knees. "I swore I'd protect you. I let someone else cut you open like you were just another patient. I let you die because I thought someone else needed me more. But he didn't. He never did. You did." Her sobs echoed off the sterile walls, and for the first time, I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity couldn't rewrite the past. She began writing letters. To me. Long, handwritten pages she never intended to send, addressed to my husband, though she never once used that word while I was alive. She'd leave them in my old drawer, where my watch still lay untouched, where my cologne bottle remained sealed like a relic from a life she buried too late. In them, she told me things she should have said on our first night together. She told me she remembered the way I always made sure her car had gas, that I'd memorize her schedule just to bring her food between surgeries, that I'd learned to cook her favorite meals even though she never once said thank you, that when she'd find her favorite candy randomly in her locker, she knew it was me, but she never acknowledged it because she was afraid even gratitude might feel like affection. I was cruel to you, she wrote, because deep down I knew you were the only one who'd never leave, and I hated myself for needing you. I watched her seal that letter with shaking hands, tears smudging the ink, and I realized she wasn't trying to bring me back. She was trying to forgive herself. But I wouldn't give her that. Because some apologies come after too much damage. Some apologies don't heal, they only haunt. She started having dreams, not nightmares, dreams of me living. In them, we were together, happy. She laughed in her sleep, cried in her sleep, reached out in her sleep, and I never answered. I refused to speak in those dreams. I stood silently beside her, eyes blank, expression unreadable. She'd wake up sobbing every time. One night she begged aloud into the silence, "Please, just say something. Tell me I wasn't too late." But I said nothing, because in the end, I didn't owe her closure. Not after she made me a footnote in her fairy tale with Ethan. Not after she erased my name to make space for someone who would never fight for her like I did. Her silence killed me, and now my silence would kill her. The seasons changed, but grief made time meaningless for Willow. Her life, once filled with white coats and sterile procedures, now pulsed with regret. I followed her everywhere, not as a guardian, not as a ghost aching for love, but as a silent judgment hanging over her every breath. She walked differently now, heavier, slower. The woman who once looked down at me like I was a mistake, carved into her fate, now moved through the world like she was constantly apologizing just for existing. At the hospital, her reputation frayed. She no longer led surgeries, no longer taught interns with that fierce intelligence I once admired from afar. Whispers circled behind her back. She hasn't been the same since Dr. George died. Some say she was supposed to operate on him. Wasn't she close with Dr. Ethan? But none of them knew the truth, how she'd abandoned me to soothe Ethan's cold and warm his ego instead of keeping the promise she made on our wedding day. And yet even Ethan had begun to fade. He didn't wait around. The moment Willow turned cold, distant, unreachable, he stepped back, made excuses, eventually transferred to a different hospital without so much as a goodbye. That gutted her. I saw it. She sat alone in the break room for hours that day, staring at the mug I used to drink from, holding it like it was a live grenade. She whispered, "Everyone leaves," but I wanted to scream. I never did. I never would have. And you still let me die. She started isolating completely. Therapy sessions became confessionals. She admitted to June that she didn't feel like a person anymore. "I walk through life like a widow who killed her own husband," she said, "and I'm terrified that I loved him, that I really did, but only realized it once it was too late to matter." June asked gently, "Do you believe he would have forgiven you if he was still here?" Willow didn't hesitate. "No," she whispered, "and he shouldn't." At home, she lit candles at night, not for comfort, but as punishment. She'd sit in front of my photo and talk like I was listening, and maybe I was, but I never gave her a sign. "You were always there, George," she said one night, voice cracking. "I treated you like an obligation when you were the only one who truly chose me. I humiliated you, ignored you, made you feel like a stranger in your own marriage. And when you needed me most, I walked away." Her shoulders trembled. "I used to think Ethan was my forever, but it was you. You were my forever, and I threw you away like you meant nothing." It was the first time she said it out loud, that she loved me, but it landed like ash, not fire. Because love isn't something you confess to a grave. It's something you fight for when the person is still breathing, and she never fought. She never even tried. I began visiting the OR she abandoned me in, night after night. Sometimes she came too, like we were drawn to the same spot by fate's cruel design. She'd sit on the cold floor, stare at the surgical table, and whisper apologies to no one. "I should have been there. You trusted me. You trusted me." I wanted to tell her that I did, but she'd shattered that trust with a single selfish choice. Eventually, she started writing again. Letters. Dozens of them. Pages soaked in ink and guilt. "Dear George," they always began, "I miss you. I hate myself. I wish I could go back. I wish I had looked at you properly just once and seen the man who was standing right in front of me, loving me when I didn't deserve it. She never mailed them. She stored them in a shoebox under the bed, her shrine of guilt. Sometimes she'd fall asleep clutching one of my old shirts, mumbling my name through half sobs. But the name she once spat out like venom now tasted like a prayer. And I remained silent, watching, never responding, because what would I even say? That her tears now balanced the years of indifference? That her heartbreak could somehow resurrect the love she buried alive with me? No. Let her carry the silence. Let her feel what it's like to beg for something that never comes. She started volunteering at a free clinic, trying, in her broken way, to atone. She treated each patient like they were sacred. She smiled gently, held hands, offered warmth that she once withheld from me. People praised her kindness. They called her an angel. But I knew. I saw the truth. This wasn't healing. This was penance. She never smiled at home, never laughed in joy, never let anyone close. The moment someone tried, she pulled away like touch itself might ignite her shame. One day, she stood in front of a mirror for over an hour, holding her wedding ring and staring at her reflection like she no longer recognized herself. Finally, she said, "I wish I had loved you in time." She slipped the ring back on and never took it off again. Her parents visited once. They asked why she still wore the ring. She didn't answer, just walked away. Her mother later cried in the kitchen, whispering, "She's not our Willow anymore." But maybe this was the real Willow, the one she buried under resentment and duty, the one I caught glimpses of late at night when she didn't know I was watching. The one who could have loved me if only she'd let herself. She stopped going to social events, stopped dressing up, stopped pretending, and yet she looked more human now than ever before. One night, I found her on the balcony where I used to stand, my favorite spot in the whole apartment. She looked out at the stars, silent for a long time. Then softly she spoke. "I think I loved you from the beginning," she said, "but I was angry that it wasn't Ethan. Angry that my life was chosen for me, and I took that anger out on you. You who never once raised your voice. You who brought me coffee, even when I wouldn't look at you. You who kissed me on the forehead the night before our wedding and said you hoped we could build something real, even if it started from nothing." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I spat on that love, and I lost you, and I deserve to be haunted." I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell her that I had waited for those words for years, that I would have forgiven her if she'd said them when I still had breath in my lungs. But now, it didn't matter. Love is about timing, and she missed it every single time. Months passed, the letters continued, the apologies never stopped, but so did my silence. I became the weight in her chest she would never shake, the voice she could no longer hear, the man she now loved too late to save. One day she visited my grave again. It was raining. She didn't bring an umbrella, just the shoebox of letters. She sat down in the mud, drenched, shivering, and one by one she read them aloud. "I wish I had danced with you that night you asked. I wish I had told my friends we were married. I wish I had chosen you instead of pretending I didn't have a choice. I wish I had stayed in that OR." Her voice cracked. "But most of all, I wish I had looked into your eyes just once and said, 'I love you.'" She buried the letters under my name, hands trembling, and whispered, "You deserved so much more than what I gave you." As she stood up and turned to leave, I followed her, not as a soul longing to be loved, but as a shadow she would never outrun. Because she didn't just lose me, she killed the only version of herself who could have ever been truly loved, and that would be her punishment forever. The ghost of the man she loved too late, the silence that answered every apology, and the empty space beside her that would never hold her hand again.